Live from Pittsburgh, Kansas, it's Techno Kungfu with Shyamal Chandra and Bobby Brooks. Hey, Bobby,
Hey, what's going on?
what's new this week? I've seen a lot of news that was very interesting, and I'd like to get to that first. But before you get to that, do you have any vexing questions on your mind today?
Um, Vexing questions. Interesting. Well, I have this curious thing that has actually happened last week that I learned.
Okay.
Um, which and it's neither to do with intelligence or um, I guess worth,
Okay.
but I actually ran into a situation where we were working on an industrial size dryer.
Okay.
This particular man makes $75 just to drive to you
Okay.
and $75 to drive back.
Okay.
Now, if he does any work, he charges $100 an hour.
Okay. Wow.
So basically, you're on the hook for $250 for him to show up and say everything is fine
Wow.
and flip a breaker. And I was like, man, this guy is killing it. I
Yeah,
mean,
that
don't get me
re-
wrong.
that,
Don't
that
get me
remi-
wrong. I'm sure it's complicated. I'm sure it's difficult. I'm sure there's a lot. There's a lot he has to know. But it
yeah,
was just pretty
it remi-
amazing to me that the price tag.
yeah. It reminds me of those commercials from the 90s where they had the refrigerator that tells the repairman it's broken and automatically calls um, the refrigerator repairman, and he comes to your door and says something's wrong with your refrigerator. What can I do? And then it says, business on demand. Comes on the screen. So
Yeah, it's just crazy it because it's so specific and so specialty that he can charge that amount and actually get it. He gets that.
yeah,
I mean, he makes a living that way. I'm like, wow, that's amazing.
cool.
Nothing for nothing. It was just the idea that like I was in electronics engineering, and
Yes.
at the rate he's getting paid, he would have made more than I did with my degree. And he doesn't have a degree. He is his specialty is just working on those dryers, and because he's the only one who can, he can charge this exorbitant amount of money. I was like, wow. I was like, maybe I've been going about this the wrong way the entire time.
Right. Right. Right.
I mean, because
Okay.
he is like you have to call him. Like, I mean, you don't have an option.
Right.
So it's sort of like a monopoly in a way, where not necessarily a monopoly, but basically, unless you can find somebody else, like he has no competition, so he can charge what he wants.
Right. Monopoly. Yeah.
Anyway, that's all I had.
So
I
I
thought
was
that was
gonna I was gonna talk about the NCAA tournament bracket and the basketballs games that have been played so far, and I thought you might have caught some of those on the way here. The biggest upset of the past week was University of Virginia losing to University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Did you see that one? A 16 beats a one-seeded ranked team for the first time ever in NCAA Big Dance history.
I just caught part of the game. I didn't get to see the whole thing, but I mean, it is what it is. If you're good at ball, then you're good at ball, and it all comes out in the wash. They show their colors.
And the most amazing thing, that Virginia team was ranked one overall and was picked by so many pundits to win the whole thing. Yet they lost by 20 points in the first round of the NCAA tournament.
And the thing is too is that from like the bookie standpoint, man, they're having to pay out a lot of money right now, because anybody who bet on that game and bet the other way made a lot of money.
Right.
Because the payout would have been very significant.
Right.
And
And
are you familiar with the movie Casino?
yeah, with Andy Garcia and other people, yeah.
And De Niro.
De Niro, yeah.
Yeah, Pesci had a statement. He talked about the character in the movie, which was played by De Niro, which was that he knows the type of bounce you get off of the different types of floors in a basketball court, because it does change things. I mean, even when people who ran track, like if they have a slant, because a lot of them do, to the track, it completely changes how people run because you're running on a slant. And a basketball bounces different off of wood than it does off of vinyl, and he paid attention to that. So like there's bookies who made a lot of money or lost a lot of money just based off that game, and it I'm sure it's probably pretty significant in their world, very significant in their world.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Mutombo game, Denver Nuggets beating the one seed Seattle Supersonics many years back, where Dikembe Mutombo said, waved his finger and he says, "Not in my house," and then he beat them. So that was a big upset back in the days.
Yeah.
So, or it's up there with the Rockets winning the championship as a 7th seed, and Rudy Tomjanovich saying, "Never underestimate the heart of a champion." So those are really good moments in basketball history. So, but then they lost to Kansas State in the next round, and Kansas State is facing Kentucky in the Sweet 16 in Atlanta this weekend, or this Friday to this weekend. Yeah, somewhere. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, 22nd.
I always heard good things about Kentucky.
Yeah, Kentucky. They used to have Rick Pitino, and then they had a bunch of, and then they had Tubb, and they had now they have that Calipari. So they've had a host of different coaches, and then Adolph Rupp was their famous coach at one time, who brought the institution to the way it is right now, to its current state. Kind of like KU has its Roy Williams and Bill Self, and prior to that, they had many other coaches that were really famous. So,
and I also look at it from the same environment that that I kind of grew up in. With I dealt with a lot of I think I've dealt with some bookies, and if your coaches change or your management change too much in a short period of time, they don't give you very much. They don't give you much, because basically you're saying that it's so screwed up that you're trying to fix it. However, on the flip side of that is when it kind of turns to a lottery, because, well, if you do find the right guy, then yeah, they're going to turn into an awesome team immediately, which is probably kind of what happened, in the game we were talking about prior, where they got rid of the guy who, whatever the problem was, they got rid of the problem,
right.
And once they corrected it, they did extremely well. And from the gambling side of it, you very much have to keep up on who's doing what and who's changing and where. Like, not only the players, but the coaches, the management. How much do they care? What are they doing? It becomes a very complicated process.
And how can in 1 year a coach establish himself when the recruitment was done by another coach the previous year, and they're just trying to make do with what they have? I mean, you should judge a coach by after like 1, 2 or 3 years. Then they have solidified their place in basketball history. And or basketball, their role at tenure should be at least 2 to 3 years, so they can get their foothold there and everyone knows their name and they can recruit people from high school and develop them. Maybe 4 years. They can develop them from freshman to senior and see how well they develop over time. That's very
Right.
important.
I also do. I saw a quote from a comedian that I like.
What?
And he wasn't really making a joke though.
Okay.
What his half joke was basically the NCAA has like taken pride that they don't pay their players, and he saw that. He's like, and his response was, so basically you make these people work that hard and you don't pay them.
Right.
Like that's your point of pride. That's
Right.
not a point of pride. They're working harder than most people in the NBA.
Right.
So your sense of pride is that you don't pay. Like that's horrible. Like I don't necessarily think we should pay college players, but the college game has gotten to the point of the NBA. I mean, like, it's up there. Even college football is that way at this point. People bet on it constantly.
Yeah, I think the people
and I understand that they're college students, but they could be college students and not play football. Like you don't have to play football to be in college. So the idea of paying them at least something, at least helping them with their tuition, like, which a lot of times doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. Not like you think it does. I mean, it's not like Blue Stripes. Remember that movie with McNulty back in the day?
Yeah. With Anthony Hardaway and a bunch of other people.
It just doesn't happen like that. And
right.
And it still does in a way, because otherwise we wouldn't have scouts who like show up and scout players. That like you've got a guy from, I don't know, pick a state, from New Mexico who shows up to Arkansas to scout a player.
Yeah.
He knows he's in competition with other schools, so he's providing incentives. I mean, there should be a line on that, I understand, but providing incentives, even if it's just scholarships, even if it's just or just cash, is not. I don't think that's a horrible thing. I really don't. And especially like some of these students, like who come from low income communities, like they could absolutely use that cash to help their family. I don't think that's bad. I don't think that's bad.
Okay.
I would argue when people go that's not how this should work. Well, we live in a free market society, and we live in. I mean, and if you become a free agent, you get bid on. Well, that's basically what every college student is. They're a free agent, so they get bid on. So they not only should, but they deserve those perks. I mean, they've worked that hard to get to this point that you want them that bad. I don't have a problem with it. I don't understand the problem with it. I mean, most of those guys, their dream is to go into the, NBA or the NFL or whatever.
Right.
But as it stands right now, they're great at what they're doing. So pay them what they're worth. Like, it only makes sense to me. Whether you do it through scholarships, whether you do it through scholarships and cash, like, it doesn't need to be shady. There's no reason for it. I have no problem with you, going, hey, we're going to give you a scholarship and, things are going hard at home. Okay, well, we'll give you a little bit of cash too to help out with that. That doesn't, none of that sounds nefarious to me. It doesn't sound horrible. I don't see that as bad.
Also,
certainly from people coming from poverty who are just good at their sport.
Right.
You've put him into college and gave him a scholarship, and you're helping him out at home. that doesn't seem nefarious to me. I understand I understand that you're coming from a place of I want to sign this guy. However, at the end of the day, like when the wash comes out, his family got helped. He got a scholarship. He's going to college, which he probably couldn't have afforded. And you got a great basketball player, football player, whatever the sport may be. Like, I don't. Who got hurt? That's the problem I have.
Right.
I don't understand where anybody got hurt. No one got in. Like no one's injured in this. I don't understand that, and I certainly think the NCAA is trying to say that they don't do that, mostly because they don't want to have to do that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like they're putting themselves on that pedestal so that they can not do it. I don't really believe that that's their true feeling. I think that that's a false statement. I think that you're doing that because you don't want to do it, and so you put yourself on this pedestal. We're better than that. Well, that's arguable. At best, that's arguable. But I mean, watching the games, I especially with football, I love to watch college football. They take a lot more risk, and their players fight a lot harder. The reason being is because they're fighting for an NFL spot. Is what they're doing.
Right.
The idea is that someday I can get in the NFL, and the only way they're going to look at me is if I do really good here.
Right.
So, like, everybody's out for themselves in this deal. But no one's really getting hurt, I don't think. I don't see no problem with, monetarily. I mean, how much does the college make off these games? They charge a ticket price to get in.
Yeah.
And the players get nothing.
What about endorsements deals for like different brands? That would be even better. Allow them to do endorsement deals for brands. What do you think about that?
Well, and there's no reason that shouldn't happen. Why can't a college student who's good at the game that everybody recognizes? I mean, LeBron was one of those. Like, why can't he have endorsement deals in college? Why is that bad? First off, as a college, it makes you look good because LeBron is getting, an endorsement deal, and he goes to your college. That can only make you look good, right?
Right.
Like, I don't understand the logic there. I really don't.
Yeah. One of the people who are not a proponent of paying the student athletes says that they get unlimited meals and snacks for athletes because the NCAA recently approved that in 2014. Earlier, they had a stipend they give for 3 meals a day called the food stipend. Now the new rule, they allow walk-on athletes to be to be given unlimited meals and snacks. So this is one thing that the proponents or antagonists of that particular statement that you said that athletes should be paid respond, and they said a lot more things like gourmet meals and travel tickets to the games and tickets for their family members and stuff like that. And so it's a very interesting debate to have, and I think you brought up some really good points, and I think that's one thing that should be thought of in the background while this NCAA tournament is being played.
Well, from a different point of view, my major was electronics engineering, and at the college I went to, they would literally buy you out of school. There were times that happened where you got far enough and they would talk to you and they'd see what you were worth and they would literally buy you out of school. They would be like, hey, here's a bonus. Stop. Just come and go to work. How is that any different? Because that's perfectly fine. That is perfectly fine. It happens all the time.
Right. I mean, they had
Like,
that issue. That issue. If you've seen a lot of players like Kobe Bryant, came straight out of high school, and then Kwame Brown, who came out of high school, and many other players. Jermaine O'Neal came out of high school, and you see, how much they developed over time compared to the players that went to Duke, North Carolina, Kansas, and UCLA, and many other schools across the United States. Those are the big four, in my opinion. There's more, like Michigan State too, and so it just depends on what you say. I mean, everyone has their own opinion. Some people say that player development during college is very important. Taking it to the next stage in terms of getting national exposure during your prime time basketball matchups is very central. Being able to uh, be able to perform under pressure of the NCAA big dance tournament is one really good way to get recruiters to find out about you. Sports recruiters, recruitment from those different teams. It builds your credentials, builds your portfolio, builds your statistics, builds that you can play as a team member or part of a team of very gifted student athletes. That's what the NCAA brings to the table. That if you skip the NCAA and go straight to the NBA, you lose a lot of time. But sometimes it works out just right. It depends on the type of people they have in the NBA that are developing these players and preventing them from doing the wrong thing at the wrong time. That might halt their career, or have some personal issues that might halt their career. So this is a very delicate situation for these young students, high school students, and I think it's very important that they take good care of these people wherever they go, and exercise rules so they do not suffer because they go to the wrong team, or the wrong player personnel, or wrong GM, or the wrong coach, and they never matriculate into a big star. Kind of like if you look at Freddie Adu, he was a big star in U.S. soccer at the age of 13, and he had got a deal with Nike, and he never matriculated into the best soccer player in U.S. history, as Nike has projected him, and Sports Center projected him to be like the next greatest Pele of U.S. And I was in a airplane with him once. I was going on U.S. Airways. I was in an airplane with him, and he was with his team, and it was pretty cool to see him. But then he never matriculated into anyone like Eddie Pope, or Donovan, or any of these big players that have been there for the U.S. team under Bruce Arena. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about Freddie Adu? Have you heard of Freddie Adu?
no, I'm
Okay.
not.
Okay.
Basketball, I follow lightly. I'm not. NFL is more my thing, or college basketball, football. But I mean, I try to keep up, but it's just not in my wheelhouse as much. It's still there, but um, I would like to add though that it's funny that to join the American military, we absolutely have sign-on bonuses, and that's perfectly fine. And we will completely cover your college. That's perfectly fine. And you sign up, and that's perfectly fine. And they come through on that, and that's perfectly fine. Yet you can't give a sign-on bonus to somebody who joins a college. That's immoral. Like I have a problem with that, because like Well, first off, you're both government institutions, or like I would think, in some area of the spectrum, you're both government institutions, but it's only valid if the federal government says it's okay. And I'm like, no, like you're doing basically what the NCAA wants to do, and when they try to do it, you go, well, you can't do that. That's wrong. That's immoral. Like, well, wait, you do that every day. I've actually had plenty of friends who've signed on in the military and didn't realize what they were signing because they were so young, and got horrible, horrible deals from the government. I mean, it's gone the other way too, but it was offered to me when I was still in high school. I mean, I was a sophomore, I think, or a junior. I took the ASVAB, and because my scores were so high, they went, oh, we want you to do coding. We will absolutely sign you. And I even had a group of Navy SEALs come and talk to me, which I thought was funny. For the listeners at home, I am about 5'8" and weigh about 145 pounds. And I went, are you kidding? You don't need to go to the Navy SEALs? Like, something's wrong with your vetting process. Because, I mean, in their defense, the guy that showed up was pretty short too. But he said, no, big guys typically don't get through. They quit. Little guys typically win. But I went, no, I'm not doing that. And it was a moment in my life where I had to make an adult decision, and I had to do it as a sophomore in high school.
Wow, that's amazing. That pretty cool.
I mean, well, yeah, it was cool, but it was also kind of scary because they were intimidating. I mean, like they pulled me out of class. They go out, they were like, you need to go to the counselor's office, and I was like, oh Jesus, what do I do? And there was one really big guy and one short, squatty guy, and they were telling me all the benefits. And don't get me wrong, I have friends in the military, I have a lot of friends in the military, but they were desperate to talk me into it, and they were telling me the bonuses that I'd get monetarily, and you know, they obviously the GI Bill, like school's paid for, but they were talking about bonuses, just cash, and when you're a sophomore in high school and somebody offers you that amount of money, it's really hard for you to say no. I did say no because I was like, well, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not how I saw my life going.
Yeah.
But that I don't understand why that's acceptable. But when you scout a player for the NCAA, which is going to college, like right now, like when you offer them a bonus to sign with you, I don't understand. And I guess maybe you could say it's unfair because not all, you know, now you're kind of skewing it because not every college has the money to do that. So I don't know, maybe you make it a salary cap. Maybe you do it like the NFL does.
Right.
Or maybe you set it up in a certain way where you're only allowed to offer so much money. But I don't know. I think the entire idea of not paying those guys is pretty jacked up. Especially, it would be fine. I would feel better about it if you could just go to any of those basketball games and just walk in. But you can't. If you want floor seats to a Duke game, they're not just going to. They charge. There's money involved here. There's an exchange, and so you're not paying the players. Well, so the people who are actually doing the work aren't getting the money, basically, and that's and your justification for that is that, well, I honestly don't understand the justification for it. I really don't at all. I mean, they're the talent. If I did a comedy show for you, you would pay me, right? Even if I was in college, you asked me to do this show. I did the show. And then you said, well, yeah, you don't get any money. The people who set it up get all the money. Well, wait, then why am I here? because that's the talent, right? I mean, you don't go to an NCAA game because somebody set it up. No, you could care less who set it up. It's like, I guarantee you, if you went to an NCAA game, I would ask you who set it up. You would have no idea,
Right.
no earthly idea, and it wouldn't matter because that's not what you're there to see, right?
Right.
So I just think it's a strange it was a strange statement for the NCAA to make. They acted like they were on the side of right, and I was like, especially the way they put it. I was like, no, it actually just sounds like you don't pay players because you don't feel that you have to, and that sounds horrible. It just sounds like you just don't pay people. Because
Right.
we all know that you make money. I mean, anybody who's ever been to like NCAA game, especially later on in the season, those tickets are not cheap.
Right. And they make $821.4 million for the Division One men's basketball championship television and marketing rights.
And
they
the
also,
players saw nothing.
yeah, nothing, yeah. And 129 million for the championship ticket sales.
And that's the reason everybody showed up, was the people on the court, and you paid them nothing. And you actually stand behind that you don't pay them anything?
Right.
Like that's ridiculous.
Right.
Anyway,
Yeah.
what else you got?
Well, if we go down the bracket, there was an upset by Loyola Chicago by 1 point over Tennessee, 63-62. I didn't see that one, but I saw the one with Miami and Loyola Chicago. It was a really close game, 64-62 Loyola on top there in the first round. So they're off to the Sweet 16, and that's pretty cool, That's very cool against Nevada, who beat number 2 Cincinnati in this South Division of the NCAA tournament bracket. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be exciting because the other side of the bracket, with Kansas and Villanova, is going just pretty much fairly straightforward. However, the West Division, which has Nashville, Xavier losing to to Florida State, and Ohio State losing to Gonzaga, Michigan winning over Houston, and Texas A&M trouncing over the perennial winner UNC, University of North Carolina, by more than 21 points. 21 points exactly, yeah. So this is a pretty amazing bracket, and I'm sure there's going to be more upsets to come. Like you said, in tennis, there's a big problem when you play on hard courts, when you play on clay courts, when you play on grass, when you play on the American hard courts. The bounce is different. The same thing here. The bounce is different on each basketball hoop. The whole ambience, the aura, everything is different. Or have people normalize that so they don't have to experience the same thing in a different way every time they shoot the ball. Will there be cameras flickering in their eyes? Will the announcers be really loud music in the background? Will the cheerleaders be mocking them? Will the fans be saying all sorts of mean things to them? This all pays attention to the sixth man award to the fans, and
Well,
also.
Good.
Okay.
But like I can speak to that on some level because like when I did MMA,
Yes.
I trained for a long time. It was very, very good. But sparring, even hard sparring,
Yeah.
when you walk into a ring and there are people sitting there staring at you, and you are the middle of this stage,
Yeah.
the nerves you have, they change how you operate. It's hard to explain, but like you can get into a really tense sparring session.
Right.
and that's fine. But the only people watching are the other people that you work with every day.
Right.
When you go into a group of strangers, there's music, there's loud noise, there's, because they're making it a show.
Right.
You get nervous, and at least I get nervous, and get to a point where I'm kind of self-conscious about my level of technique. Like, however I thought I was going to walk in here immediately goes out the door. Now I'm starting to question myself immediately because the blunt force trauma of the show of it.
Right.
It throws you off. That's not what you do every day. It's not what you do every day. And then there's also the idea of like different altitudes and things. Like, for instance, when they have fights in Denver, you're at a higher altitude. You literally have less wind. That's a physiological fact. Like, you have less wind. Somebody who's trained there all year is going to have more wind than you, and so you're literally not as good as you would be otherwise.
Yeah.
There's just weird little idiosyncrasies like that,
right.
And especially when it comes to the crowd. When there's a crowd, it is different because they're here to see a show. Well, when you're just training, no one cares. They're half paying attention to you, if they're paying attention to you at all. They're doing their thing. It's different, and I understand that it's kind of like performance anxiety, basically. Like, you're used to just doing this, and now all of a sudden, like, oh, you have to do it, and it's like, well, wait, you can lose in a sparring match, and it's not a big deal, no one cares. But now all of a sudden, like, even when I did judo, like, there's 150 people in the stands, and they're all staring at me, and I'm not used to that. Like, normally I'm doing this in front of 8 people. Half of them are doing something else. They don't care what I'm doing. They're not even paying attention.
Right.
And even if they are, it's only 8 people. But when there's like stands brought out, and it's disconcerting. I mean, it changes your entire mindset, and you start to get nervous about whether or not, like, am I good enough to do this? And it's really weird.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously you're good enough. That's why you're there. But you start to question yourself really quickly.
Yeah. Are you another Ryan Leaf, or are you another Todd Blackledge, or are you Joe Montana, or are you Tom Brady? That's the question of the day. So, because if you know from history, Ryan Leaf was picked, I think, number 1 or 2 in the draft, in NFL draft, and after 1 or 2, 3 years, he was out of the league pretty much. Same thing with Todd Blackledge, who was selected number 1 by the Kansas City Chiefs back in the 80s, before they had Joe Montana and all the great Chiefs quarterbacks from the West Coast offense of San Francisco 49ers. He was a dud, basically. So
I would tend to be more like Joe Montana, who was scared every time he walked out there, but rationalized that, well, there's obviously a reason I'm here, right?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't get here like, they didn't just throw me in here.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it doesn't really relieve your stress, like, because you're still expected to perform on a live stage in front of in his case, that millions of people.
Right.
But that, like, even though you know that you're good enough, you're
right.
like, man, I can't screw this up.
Right.
And that stress alone can make you make mistakes, just because rather than being comfortable, you're so worried about messing this up that you mess it up. Does that make sense? Like,
right.
You take 3 extra seconds to think about it. Well, that 3 extra seconds cause a receiver to get in the way, and so now you have to change receivers. Like just talking about it from a football angle, but like when there's a crowd looking at you, it makes you operate differently because you don't want to let anybody down.
Right.
But at the same time, that's the reason you're letting everybody down is because you're taking that extra time and you're not acting off instinct and you're not doing what you normally would do.
Right.
You're not acting like you.
Oh.
And Joe Montana was always pretty humble about that. He's like, it always scares me to walk out on that field. Are you kidding me? There's
yeah. And so many distractions. Have you seen that ESPN documentary series or based on reality series where they talk about the football players that what they go through? They have all the girls and they have the drugs and the booze and the family that wants to extort money out of them. They have all the perks and all the corruption, bribery, all the coaches telling them to do this and instead of doing that, and all sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like you're like, that's not the only thing you do. Like you have a family at home. You obviously have you have to take care of them. I mean, well, monetarily you do, but like emotionally you have to take care of them. And then when family calls and they need money for something, well, you have it. But is this going to turn into a thing now where now every time you need money, you call me? Like that's a thing. And I understand. Like there's like
it's a very sensitive situation to be in. So you just have to be careful with those issues.
Kevin Hart, who's a comedian, he's a great philanthropist to his own family.
Right. That's really good. Charity starts at home.
But when he first got really huge, his deal was like, I'm paying off my mom's house. I'm paying off, like he had a list. And then after that, people would just come at him, family members, and they would act like he was supposed to. And he was like, well, wait, I'm not supposed to. Like, let's get that clear. Like, I made my money because I worked hard. And he's a really hard worker. He's like, I made my money because I worked hard. I don't owe you anything. And then they'd point out what he had already done and be like, well, of course I bought my mom's house. Like, but they would act like he owed them something, and he felt a bit of guilt about finally going, no, I'm just not going to do that.
Yeah.
And then it got to a point where, like, he felt bad because he said that, and then he started to think about it. He was like, wait, why should I feel bad? Because I put in this much time and got successful and worked that hard, that I owe you something. That doesn't make any sense at all. Like, you didn't help me get here, so why do I owe you anything? I owe you nothing. So I understand that plight. Like there's the plight of anybody basically who's making good money is that, especially when you make it that quickly.
Right.
It's like people who win the lottery. There's statistics on that typically they are poor within 3 years. They're in poverty. Right. Because
they're not used
to handling that amount of money.
Yeah, they don't plan out the rest of their life. How they're gonna have budget and how they're gonna have certain restrictions on certain things and how they utilize money and where they should be frugal and where they should not be frugal. And
there was actually a study done that said if the first thing a person does after they win the lottery is hire an attorney and an accountant, which typically you can do even before you turn in the ticket.
Yeah.
When people do that, they typically end up okay. Because the accountant will go, well, this is where we're going to put money, and this is what we're going to do. And the attorney's going to go, this is how we're going to handle things. If they do that first, if that's their first move, they typically end up okay. People who go, I don't need any of that, just give me my money, are typically broke within 3 years.
If you look at someone, I was watching the Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous back in the 80s, and then I watched it again in the 2000s with all the VH1 with the British guy who talks with that British accent. And basically, they had one special on Britney Spears, and it was really good because they talked about how she was able to successfully build her brand image without ruining it by having some sort of chaotic uh, um, catastrophe. And she did it so well that she got to such a high stage that she was doing Pepsi commercials. That's where Michael Jackson was at one time before 1993 happened. And it's just amazing how she was able to put together what resume of what records she was able to put up. Sorry, I had some problem today. Um, and she was able to put up such good music with her producers and her manager and a record company that she was able to propel her career into an exciting avenue. And then obviously bad things happened to her, but she's back. Britney is always back. So
Well, and it's one of those things where if you're successful, the best thing you can do is surround yourself with successful people.
yeah,
So get a good attorney, get a good accountant,
good cook.
get a good PR agent. If you do that correctly, you can continue this for a very long time. But trying to play 4 different roles by yourself, you're not going to do well. Like, I mean, even the most intelligent person would have a hard time with that, simply because you can't do all of that work. There's way too much involved in any one of those things, whether it be the actual production, whether it be the accounting, whether it be the attorney.
Right.
You can't do all of those things alone. So it's important to surround yourself, and those people are expensive. Sure, they are. They are expensive. However, they'll make sure that your career doesn't end, that it continues.
Right.
And that's their job, because here's the thing too, like, if you lose your job, guess what? You can't pay them. So it's in their best interest to help you. Like, it's a situation where when you hire them, it is in their best interest to be on your side, obviously, because that's where the money comes from. So obviously they're going to work as hard as they can.
But then there's like devil's advocate argument, like Selena, that movie with Jennifer Lopez, where the manager mysteriously kills Selena, who was one of the top singers with her song in America. Yeah, and she was very famous in Hispanic area, Hispanic venues. And then she had that one song, and then she had the movie made about her, and it was such a tragedy, So I don't know. You just pick the wrong people, and you're in big trouble. You have to be very careful when you get that much money, when you get that much fame, when you have so many people who know you. You have to be extremely careful what you do, what you say, what you eat, where you eat, who you eat at. There's so many problems you have to be very, very kind of paranoid about, because otherwise you might get sick, you might die, you might get shot at, you might get killed. There's so many things, or you might have someone who might extort money and blackmail you. There's so many problems with the current world of fanfare. So
I mean, and everybody makes fun of Kevin Hart.
Yeah.
Just because of how many people walk around him all the time. There's at least 3 very large men. His agent, and I think an attorney. At all times, they walk around him. And it makes good sense. I mean, it makes great sense because basically, if you want to talk about a deal,
Yeah.
he has his attorney right here. You
But,
know,
yeah,
if you, I mean, it makes great sense to surround yourself with those people literally at all times. That makes perfect sense to me. I don't understand why people give him such flack for that. They act like he rolls around with a posse. Well, of course he does, because anywhere he walks into, somebody's going to go, I have a great idea. And his attorney can go, that's not a great idea. Don't do that. Like, you know what I mean? Or his accountant can go, well, look, that's going to cost too much money. Like, it's perfectly fine to surround yourself with those people. That's good. That's good. That's smart. That's intelligent.
right.
That way you don't have to sit here and try to make that decision on your own and horribly screw up and waste a lot of money.
Or you could have a computer which does it for you and decide what to do. That's the future. I believe that's the future. Like a legal advisor, chat bot, or a legal or a PR manager chat bot, or someone in a third world country who's your doctor, who's your lawyer, who's your this, outsourcemylife.com, and fires people that are hired by you if they're not performing up to your caliber or skill that you expect them when you buy their contracts out, and make them your particular person or whatever. I don't know. This is just a thought. What do you think,
No,
Bobby?
you actually reminded me of something that maybe we'll hit on next week because it'll probably be a longer conversation. But there's a gentleman, I don't remember his name, but he had an audio series that I listened to, and it wasn't like a scam. It was more like, I'm going to tell you some tricks. And basically what it was that you can start a business and automate it to the point where you're only involved in signing a check.
Okay.
And basically you just have to provide overwatch of your business. You don't actually it's automated enough that it basically
really?
runs itself, and
Wow.
you just basically make sure it's running correctly. And if it's not, then you change that thing. And he was all about outsourcing basically everything except for final management. And I think he said he owns like 5 businesses that he checks on every day. That's his job. His job is to check on his business and sign checks. So he wakes up at 8 o'clock in the morning,
Yeah.
checks on all his businesses, signs checks. He's done by noon and goes back to sleep. Takes a nap, then gets up and does whatever he wants. And the way he explains it actually makes sense. Like, because, you always hear about that. Like, oh, this is the best, easiest way to make money. Well, no, actually, he figured it out. Because he automates it through the internet,
Right.
through different websites. Then he has a call center that troubleshoots for him. Like, so basically, he just monitors these people to make sure that they're doing their job.
Right.
And then he signs a check. He's like, I wake up, I make sure everybody's doing their job, I sign checks, I take a nap. And he makes a lot of money. I want to say it's Tim Ferriss. It's Ferriss. I know it's Ferriss because I always think of Ferris Bueller's Day Off. But basically, the guy is, I mean, he really does have a system, and he doesn't lie. He doesn't joke around. He's like, yeah, you're gonna have to have capital up front,
Right.
to get it started. But it's sort of like once you kick the ball, it's gonna keep moving.
Right.
And he said, he's like, I've had a handful of them fail. He's like, and I took that loss, but typically the loss isn't that much. I mean, well, in the grand scheme of, business.
No.
But he's put himself in a position where he can try things, and if they work, and they make him a lot of money, and if they don't, and he loses a little bit of money. So basically, the offset comes down to he it's sort of like playing poker. Like, sometimes you bet on a bad hand and you lose that hand. But if overall you win more than you lose,
wow,
you're in the black, right? And he
but,
flat out said that.
But couldn't you make it that you have someone different at their job every day, and kind of have like a merry-go-round type of thing? So you don't have to fire, even if you fire that person, you don't have to see them again. Like, you have like 10 people who are doing the job over 10 days, and you can prune them out slowly, kind of like the Bachelorette or Bachelor show. You have like people like on probation per se, and then you finally pick those golden code monkey or something that can get the job done.
The thing about how he does it is basically he hires you for a job.
Okay.
You do it well, he'll set you a contract.
Okay.
Right? And let's say it's 2 months. So basically, you can, even if you screw up for 2 months, he's not on the hook for anything.
Okay.
I mean, he's on the hook for paying you for those 2 months, but that's it. If he gets somebody who does very well, then he goes, all right, you're on payroll. However, he's really smart too, because they're independent contractors, right?
Right.
So the taxes are on them.
Right.
So he's very intelligent about how basically he's made a business where there is no factory. Well, there is somewhere, obviously, but he's not. He's basically a person who gathers people together to get the job done.
Right.
And his sole job is to make sure that they get the job done.
Right.
And write the checks.
Right.
And I mean, I would love to call it a scheme. I would love to call it, because I've seen some of those and I've read about it, and I'm like, okay, well, first off, this is where you failed. This is where you failed it. But his is basically, even if he fails, he still wins, because he didn't really put that much into it. And when it works extremely well. When it doesn't, he lost $500, right? He's not out that much because they're all independent contractors. He doesn't sign them for enough money that it's going, you know what I mean? It's like a test program.
Right.
It's like a beta. And then if it takes off, well, then he invests money in it.
Yeah.
And it's pretty impressive the way he does it. Because at this point, I would hate to quote him wrong, but I don't know how many businesses he owns, but I do know that they're all automated. And basically, like he said, I mean, once you hear him explain it, basically what he does is he gets up and he checks on all of them. On all, I mean, he does his due diligence. He checks on all the parts of the business and makes sure that everything's running correctly.
Right.
Everything's running correctly? Cool. Then he sits down and he writes checks. And then he goes about his day. And so about 3 hours into his morning, he drinks his coffee, he looks it over, he signs some checks, and then he enjoys his day.
Yeah, and also it's very similar to the whole academia thing with assistant professors, where they hire 10 assistant professors and then they only hire one, and the other assistant professors have to go to lower tier universities. So it happens all the time in academia. They have one position open, tenure position, and they have so many assistant professors vying for that one tenured position. So that's interesting. So, anyways, Bobby, it's been 1 hour, so I think we can continue this discussion about outsourcing virtual assistants or real assistants for next week. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
All right. So this is Techno Kungfu with Brooks and Chandra. I'm Shyamal Chandra, and
I am Bobby Brooks.